During a massive emergency that overwhelmed St. Mary's Hospital, 26-year-old Dr. Emily Watson was drowning in critical cases. Then the quiet janitor stepped forward and began giving orders that saved 3 lives in 10 minutes. Who was this man? And why did veteran nurses suddenly start calling him Colonel? Before we dive into this incredible true story that will leave you speechless, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more amazing stories like this one, and trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Welcome to Hidden Heroes, where we uncover the extraordinary people hiding in plain sight. I'm your host, and today's story will change how you see the people around you forever. St. Mary's Hospital in downtown Chicago was like any other major medical center. Bustling corridors, constant emergencies, and staff who barely had time to notice each other beyond their immediate responsibilities. But on the night shift, there was one person everyone knew but no one really saw. Michael Torres had been working the night cleaning crew for 8 years. Quiet, methodical, and incredibly reliable, he moved through the hospital like a ghost. The man was probably in his 60s, though it was hard to tell. He kept his gray hair short, almost military style, and had the kind of weathered face that spoke of a life lived outdoors under harsh conditions. Dr. Emily Watson had been a resident at St. Mary's for exactly 14 months. Fresh out of medical school, she was brilliant, ambitious, and absolutely terrified of making a mistake that could cost someone their life. At 26, she was younger than most of her peers, having skipped a grade and graduated early from both college and medical school. Emily had noticed Michael, of course. He was hard to miss, not because he stood out, but because of how perfectly he blended in. While other cleaning staff chatted with nurses or took breaks in groups, Michael worked alone. He moved with a precision that seemed almost choreographed, never bumping into equipment, never getting in the way during emergencies, never making a sound. What Emily didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Michael Torres wasn't just any janitor. He was Colonel Michael Torres, retired Army Medical Corps, veteran of 3 combat deployments, former chief of surgery at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, and recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. But on paper, to everyone at St. Mary's, he was just Mike from the cleaning crew. The night that changed everything started like any other Tuesday. Emily was covering the emergency department, dealing with the usual mix of heart attacks, car accidents, and overdoses that filled urban hospitals after midnight. She was competent but still learning, still fighting the imposter syndrome that plagued every new doctor. At 2:47 a.m., everything went wrong at once. The first ambulance arrived with a family of 4 from a head-on collision. The second brought in a construction worker who'd fallen 3 stories. The third carried a young mother in cardiac arrest. Within 20 minutes, every trauma bay was occupied, every attending physician was operating, and the remaining residents were overwhelmed. Emily found herself in Trauma Bay 3 with Marcus Williams, a 19-year-old college student who'd been the driver in the family collision. He was conscious but showing signs of internal bleeding. His blood pressure was dropping, his skin was pale and clammy, and his abdominal area was rigid to the touch. "I need a CT scan, stat," Emily called out, but the radiology department was backed up with the other critical cases. She could feel panic starting to creep in as she watched Marcus's vital signs deteriorate. That's when she noticed Michael Torres standing in the doorway. He wasn't cleaning. He wasn't moving his cart or emptying trash bins. He was watching the monitors, studying Marcus with a kind of focused attention that seemed out of place for a janitor. "Excuse me," Emily said sharply, stress making her voice harsher than intended. "I need this space clear." Michael didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer to the bed, his eyes still on the monitors. "Doctor," he said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that made Emily pause. "This patient needs immediate surgical intervention. The CT scan will take too long." Emily stared at him. "I'm sorry, who are you two?" "His blood pressure is dropping too fast," Michael continued, moving to Marcus's side. "Classic signs of splenic rupture from blunt abdominal trauma. You've got maybe 10 minutes before he goes into irreversible shock." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Not because they were wrong, but because they were exactly right. Every instinct she developed over the past year was screaming the same diagnosis, but she'd been second-guessing herself, following protocol instead of trusting her training. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How do you, Michael was already moving, not waiting for permission. He checked Marcus's pulse, examined his abdomen with practiced efficiency, then looked directly at Emily. "Dr. Watson, I need you to call surgery immediately. Tell them we have a grade 3 splenic rupture requiring emergency splenectomy. Get 2 units of O-negative blood from the bank, and prep this patient for immediate transport to or. Emily's training kicked in. Something about the way Michael spoke, the confidence in his voice, the precision of his instructions, made her act without thinking. She grabbed the phone and started making calls. She coordinated with the surgical team. She watched Michael work. His hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that came from years of practice. He adjusted Marcus's positioned him to improve circulation, and monitored his breathing with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. "Who are you?" Emily asked again, but Michael was already stepping back as the surgical team arrived. Dr. Rodriguez, the attending surgeon, took one look at Marcus and nodded approvingly at Emily. "Good catch on the splenic rupture. Perfect timing on the call." As they wheeled Marcus away, Emily realized she was shaking. Not from stress, but from the realization that she'd almost missed a life-threatening diagnosis. If Michael hadn't intervened, she turned to find him, but he was gone. Emily spent the next hour dealing with the remaining emergencies, but her mind kept returning to the janitor who'd saved Marcus Williams's life. When things finally calmed down around 5 a.m., she went looking for him. She found Michael in the basement, methodically mopping the floors of the pathology department. He worked in silence, the only sound the gentle swish of the mop and the soft squeak of his cart wheels. "Michael," she called out. He looked up, and for the first time, Emily really looked at his face. She saw the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting in bright sunlight or focusing on difficult tasks under pressure. She saw the way he held himself, straight-backed and alert despite his age. She saw the small scar on his left temple and the careful way he moved his right shoulder, as if compensating for an old injury. "Dr. Watson," he said simply. "You saved that boy's life tonight." Michael went back to mopping. "You saved his life, doctor. I just helped you trust your instincts." "That's not true, and you know it." Emily stepped closer. "The way you diagnosed him, the way you knew exactly what to do, that wasn't luck or good instincts. That was training. Medical training." Michael stopped mopping but didn't look at her. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." Emily's voice was gentle but persistent. "I've been watching you for months without really seeing you. You never flinch at blood or gore. You move around medical equipment like you understand what it does. And tonight, you diagnosed a splenic rupture faster than I did." Michael leaned on his mop handle, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. "Dr. Watson, I'm just a janitor who's worked in hospitals for a long time. You pick things up." "No," Emily said firmly. "Tonight proved you're much more than that. The question is, why are you hiding it?" For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Michael walked over to his cleaning cart and pulled out a small leather wallet. From inside, he extracted a worn military ID card and handed it to Emily. She read it twice before the words sank in. Colonel Michael A. Torres, MD, United States Army Medical Corps. Emily looked up at him, her mouth open in shock. "You're a doctor." "I was a doctor," Michael corrected quietly. "You're a colonel." "I was a colonel." Emily stared at the ID card, then back at Michael. "I don't understand. Why are you working as a janitor when you could be running this hospital?" Michael took the ID back and returned it to his wallet. "Because sometimes you need to serve quietly for a while before you remember why you became a doctor in the first place." Over the next hour, as Michael continued his cleaning duties and Emily helped him, ignoring his protests that she had more important things to do, the story came out in pieces. Michael had enlisted in the Army at 18, straight out of high school. The military had recognized his intelligence and sent him to college and medical school on a scholarship. He'd spent 32 years as an Army physician, rising through the ranks while serving in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. "Iraq twice, Afghanistan 3 times, he said matter-of-factly. "Ran a combat support hospital in Kandahar for 2 years. Did field surgery in places where the operating room was a tent and the power came from generators that broke down every other day. Emily listened in amazement as he described surgeries performed under mortar fire, medical evacuations through hostile territory, and the constant pressure of treating wounded soldiers who were often younger than she was now. "The last deployment broke something in me," Michael admitted. "We lost too many good people. Kids, really. Boys and girls who should have been starting their careers, raising families, living normal lives." He'd retired as a full colonel with commendations that filled a display case, but the transition to civilian life had been brutal. PTSD, survivor's guilt, and the struggle to find meaning in a world where emergencies didn't involve life or death decisions had nearly destroyed him. "I tried working in civilian hospitals," he said. "But every patient reminded me of soldiers I couldn't save. Every emergency brought back memories I wasn't ready to face." So he'd taken a job as a janitor. No medical decisions, no life or death pressure, just quiet service and the chance to be around medicine without the weight of responsibility. "But you intervened tonight," Emily pointed out. Michael nodded. "Because some things are more important than your own comfort." That boy was 19, same age as many of the soldiers I treated. I couldn't stand by and watch him die because I was too scared to step forward. As dawn broke over Chicago, Emily and Michael sat in the hospital cafeteria sharing coffee and stale donuts. Around them, the day shift was arriving, and the hospital was transitioning from the quiet intensity of night to the organized chaos of day. "What happens now?" Emily asked. Michael shrugged. "I go home, sleep for a few hours, come back tonight and continue mopping lowers." "That's not what I meant." Michael looked at her for a long moment. "Dr. Watson, I appreciate your concern, but some stories don't have happy endings where the hero returns to glory. Sometimes the best you can do is find peace in small acts of service. But you could be saving lives every day instead of cleaning floors." "I am saving lives," Michael said gently. "Just in a different way." Over the following weeks, Emily found herself paying closer attention to Michael's work. She noticed how he always seemed to be nearby during critical cases, how veteran nurses would sometimes ask his opinion on difficult patients, how he had an uncanny ability to predict which equipment would be needed before anyone asked. She also noticed that he never took credit, never pushed forward unless absolutely necessary, and never revealed his background to anyone else. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later during another busy night. A multi-car accident had brought in 7 patients simultaneously, and the emergency department was once again overwhelmed. Emily was treating a middle-aged man with chest trauma when she heard shouting from Trauma Bay 1. "We're losing her," Dr. Peterson called out. "I can't get this bleeding under control." Emily looked over to see a young woman, maybe 25, with what appeared to be a severe abdominal injury. Dr. Peterson, usually calm and competent, was visibly struggling. That's when she saw Michael appear in the doorway. Their eyes met across the chaos, and Emily made a decision that would change both their lives. "Colonel Torres," she called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We need your assistance." The trauma bay fell silent. Dr. Peterson looked confused, nurses stopped mid-action, and Michael froze in the doorway. "Did she just call the janitor Colonel?" Someone whispered. Michael's face showed a mix of gratitude and terror, but after a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward. "What do we have?" Dr. Peterson, too focused on saving his patient to question the situation, quickly briefed Michael on the woman's injuries. 24-year-old female, passenger in a head-on collision, severe abdominal trauma, possible liver laceration, blood pressures dropping fast, and I can't locate the source of the bleeding. Michael moved to the patient's side, his transformation immediate and complete. Gone was the quiet janitor. In his place stood a combat surgeon with 3 decades of experience. "I need to see the CT scan," he said, his voice carrying the authority of command. "We don't have time," Dr. Peterson started. "Show me the scan," Michael repeated, and something in his tone made everyone obey. As the images appeared on the monitor, Michael studied them for less than 30 seconds. "Grade 4 liver laceration with active hemorrhage. She needs immediate surgical repair, but first we need to stabilize her circulation." His hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting 4 lines, positioning the patient, and implementing emergency procedures that Dr. Peterson had only read about in textbooks. "How do you know how to?" Dr. Peterson began, then stopped as he watched Michael work. Within 10 minutes, the patient's condition was stabilized enough for transport to surgery. As they wheeled her away, the trauma bay remained silent, everyone staring at the man they'd thought was just a janitor. Emily stepped forward. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Colonel Michael Torres, retired Army Medical Corps, former Chief of Surgery at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center." The silence stretched until Dr. Peterson finally spoke. "You're a surgeon?" "I was," Michael said quietly. "And you've been working as a janitor?" Michael nodded. "For 8 years." Dr. Rodriguez, who had joined the group, shook his head in amazement. "Do you have any idea what your experience could mean to this hospital? To our trauma program?" Michael looked around at the faces watching him, saw the mixture of confusion, admiration, and curiosity, and Emily could tell he was considering disappearing again. "Colonel," she said gently, "what would you tell a young soldier who was afraid to use his training to save lives?" Michael met her eyes and smiled for the first time since she'd known him. "I'd tell him that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of fear because lives depend on it." The next morning, Michael Torres sat in the office of Dr. Sarah Chen, St. Mary's Chief of Staff. Between them lay his military service records, medical credentials, and a job offer that would change his life once again. "Colonel Torres," Dr. Chen said, "your qualifications are extraordinary. Combat surgery experience, administrative leadership, trauma specialization. We'd be honored to have you join our staff in any capacity you choose." Michael looked out the window at the city he'd served quietly for 8 years. "I appreciate the offer, Dr. Chen, but I'm not sure I'm ready to be responsible for life and death decisions again." "With respect, Colonel, you've been making those decisions all along. You've just been doing it from the shadows." Michael considered this. "What did you have in mind?" "Trauma surgery attending, with a focus on emergency procedures and training residents. Part-time if you prefer, night shift to start if that makes you more comfortable." "And if I freeze up? If the memories come back?" Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Then we'll deal with it together. You won't be alone this time." 6 months later, Dr. Emily Watson was presenting at the monthly resident training session, discussing a case study of splenic rupture diagnosis and treatment. As she concluded her presentation, she looked out at the group of young doctors and medical students. "The most important lesson from this case," she said, "isn't about medical procedures or diagnostic techniques. It's about recognizing that extraordinary people often hide in plain sight, and sometimes the person who can teach you the most is the one you've been overlooking." In the back of the room, Dr. Michael Torres nodded approvingly. He'd been teaching at St. Mary's for 4 months now, splitting his time between trauma surgery and resident education. The nightmares still came sometimes, and there were days when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming, but he was learning to carry it with the support of colleagues who understood. After the presentation, Emily approached him. "How are you adjusting to being visible again?" Michael smiled. "It's strange, being noticed after so many years of being invisible. But I'm beginning to remember why I became a doctor in the first place." "And why was that?" "Because every life matters, and sometimes you're the only person who can make the difference between life and death." As they walked through the halls of St. Mary's Hospital, past the trauma bays where Michael had once cleaned floors and now saved lives, Emily reflected on the lesson she'd learned. Heroes don't always wear capes or carry weapons or stand in the spotlight. Sometimes they push mop buckets and empty trash cans and wait quietly for the moment when their hidden skills can make a difference. And sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to call out their name and invite them back into the light. Marcus Williams, the 19-year-old college student whose life Michael had saved that first night, graduated the following spring with a degree in pre-med. In his application essay for medical school, he wrote about the night he nearly died and the janitor-turned-doctor who saved him. "I learned that healing comes in many forms," he wrote, "and sometimes the most important medicine is simply being seen by someone who cares enough to act." The essay ended with a promise: "I want to be the kind of doctor who sees people the way Dr. Torres saw me that night, not as cases or problems, but as human beings whose lives matter." Michael Torres kept that essay in his desk drawer, next to his military commendations and a photo of the combat hospital where he'd served in Afghanistan. It reminded him that service takes many forms, and sometimes the greatest honor isn't in the recognition you receive, but in the lives you touch along the way. From janitor to colonel to healer once again, Michael's journey proved that it's never too late to step back into the light and remember who you were always meant to be. If this story moved you, there are heroes all around us, hiding in plain sight. Maybe it's time we started really seeing them.